Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the conference realignment news in North Carolina, in particular, the Board of Governors taking over a little bit more of the power in this game and approving a motion that would make all UNC schools approve their move to another conference. So essentially just getting a hand on the wheel before everything goes crazy around here. But let's jump into some Johnny Manziel news. Why don't we? Actually, before we jump into the Johnny Manziel news, let's remind you all that we get a ton of questions and things throughout the show. The best way for you all to see your questions on the screen and maybe we can have a fun interaction here is to use the link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all to see your questions on the screen. We can have a fun back and forth and interact a little bit during this show. So let's jump back in. Johnny Manziel has made a very interesting decision in regards to the Heisman ceremony. He has decided he will no longer attend, the Heisman honors until Reggie Bush gets his trophy back, which is a very, very interesting topic that people have been talking about for a very, very long time. Back in 2010, Reggie Bush had his trophy taken from him actually by USC. He voluntarily gave it up after they said they were going to take it from him. But after he got into some trouble for selling some autographs and doing some things of that nature. So a lot of this stuff has been talked about for a very long time. There have been a ton of different people that have spoken out about it, that have said he deserves it, that have said he doesn't deserve it. So tons of people have different opinions on this, but Johnny Manziel is the first one to make concrete action as far as I'm concerned. I think Manziel is, as we know, is a big proponent of NIL. He was a big proponent before it was even allowed to be a thing. And it obviously, this is something that is important to him. It's something that he didn't feel was fair when he was in college, so he took advantage of it and did it anyway. And then he's, ever since kids have gotten NIL deals, he's been very, very supportive of this new kind of era of college football, but he does show the kind of hypocrisy that's happening, because when Reggie did this, when he decided to, make the decisions that ended up losing him his Heisman, he obviously violated rules, whether it's the NCAA or USC's or whatever. He definitely violated rules. I don't think there's any two questions about that, but he wouldn't have today. And I think that's the big thing here is, as Johnny said in one of his tweets, there's two quarterbacks that won the Heisman the last couple of years making $12 million over the last 2 years. Now, I'm not sure if that number is exactly correct, but they're making a lot of money. There's no two ways about that. Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels did just fine at their times at USC and LSU. So I think Johnny has a really good leg to stand on here. When you look at the history of college football, it's always adapted, right? It's always changed, and some of that is on the field, and a lot of it recently has been off the field. And NIL has been the main change that we've had to deal with in college football lately. And someone like Reggie Bush, who was obviously an absolute icon in Southern California, I can't even fathom the amount of money he would have been able to make off the NIL game. The same thing for Johnny Football. There were limitations to what he could do because he wasn't doing it legally. He was going behind the back of the NCAA. He was using his dad as kind of cover, using a fake job as a oil rig guy for his dad to kind of tamp down all of the things he was doing, flying private jets to go see LeBron James games and being friends with LeBron James in the first place. There were tons of things that happened throughout Johnny Manziel's career that made him the face of this new era of college football before this was even the era of college football. So it's not necessarily surprising that he is kind of at the forefront of this issue. He would be the person that I think could relate the most to what Reggie Bush is feeling, has had run-ins with the NCAA in the past. So I don't think it's surprising that he is the first person to jump on board, but I'll be totally honest, I don't think Johnny Manziel is the only person that will have to jump on board before this happens. And that's not to say, Johnny is not a legend of the game and doesn't, garner as much respect as anyone, because he definitely does, and he should. But I don't think the Heisman ceremony is going to change too much until um, more guys jump in, until there's, Vince Young, and there's, what am I saying? Vince Young didn't win a Heisman? That's ridiculous. But unless there's, Tim Tebow and all these incredible players that have won Heisman's and, are the fabric of this game in the past, come out in support of Reggie Bush, I don't necessarily see a ton of things changing. Bush has been very outspoken about this throughout his time after college and in the NFL and now in media. He's put in many pleas to get his trophy back. He feels like he deserves it. He feels like it's not remotely fair that it was taken from him in the first place, but especially now with all the different rules, he definitely doesn't feel it's fair that he does not have it on his mantle. So I don't think it's necessarily surprising that more people are kind of jumping on this bandwagon. I think it's only going to happen more, to be totally honest. So I think there will be much more. But when Reggie Bush tried to, put in a plea to get his trophy back, the NCAA kind of just pushed the can down the road to USC. They said he made an institutional violation, and USC disciplined him, and so there's nothing they can really do in this scenario, which is obviously a little bit ridiculous, but there were a lot of sanctions given against USC for different dealings with Reggie Bush and other players on those teams. So it seems that, at least from the Heisman Trust's perspective, they seem to not be willing to revisit the issue until the NCAA revisits the issues with USC and sees if they want to overturn some of the things that they leveled against them in the 2000s, in the incredible era that they had. So a lot of different things at play here, a lot of different entities that have to be in lockstep for all of this to kind of come to fruition. But at the end of the day, I think this is a step in the right direction. You can not like Reggie Bush, you can not like what he did, and I totally understand that. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of it either, but at the end of the day, he should not have to hold this burden for something that right now a kid could do and we wouldn't bat an eyelash. So, especially for someone that is as good of a player as college football has seen ever. He's just remarkable in every way and gave a million college football fans incredible moments throughout watching him and seeing him even in the NFL. He was just remarkable for a number of years. So I think this is something that there's a lot of red tape to get through. There's a lot of things that have to happen for him to get his trophy back, for him to be back in the maybe in the Heisman house and be back in the conversation in New York City when that time comes. But at the end of the day, a lot of this red tape feels like just for red tape's sake. It doesn't feel like it really serves much of a purpose other than to kick the can down the road and have no one really deal with this issue. But purely from a marketing perspective, I don't understand this. I think if you're the NCAA, if you're USC, if you're Reggie Bush, if you're anyone who loves the sport, I think you would be tuning in to the first time that Reggie Bush came back to the Heisman committee or came back to the room, was in the room when someone got their Heisman trophy, has his Heisman ceremony. Maybe they give it back to him in a mini ceremony. Like, I would totally watch because he's one of the most iconic people this game has ever seen. He's been at the forefront of so many different changes in the sport, especially NIL. And he's someone that you literally can't tell the story of college football without mentioning Reggie Bush. So it's crazy to me that when you have the biggest moment, the biggest night in college football, barring the national championship, of course, when you give out the biggest trophy, the most important thing, and the thing that all kids look up to, the fact that a kid or one of the players that a lot of these young kids that are receiving this trophy, whether it's, Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams or Derrick Henry, some of the running backs that have won it since him, a lot of these guys grew up or watched back some of the incredible Reggie Bush highlights, and he is an inspiration to so many of these kids. So many of the young kids that play the sport currently are currently growing up are hearing stories about Reggie Bush. So it's crazy to me that someone that has garnered that much respect in the game, that has been that big a part of the game, has, been a part of one of the biggest, I won't necessarily call it a dynasty, but man, was USC dominant there for a long time in the 2000s. So a guy that has been a part of so much of college football history, not being a part of that night in New York City every single year just feels wrong to me. So I love that Manziel is the person that kind of jumped in front of this and kind of became the face of this movement, because he's someone that has kind of the same gripes with the NCAA and has the same gripes with the way that things work in college football. So I think it's great that he jumped in. Obviously, as I said before, I think more people are going to have to jump in before this really changes, before we really see any concrete differences or Reggie actually gets the trophy back in his hands. I think people are going to have to come to Johnny Manziel's back and be behind Reggie Bush all the way, and whoever it is, whether Matt Leinert's already been very outspoken about this, but other Heisman winners are going to have to speak up, because frankly, Johnny Manziel is not quite enough to make the difference for the Heisman Trust or for the NCAA to revisit all of the allegations against USC. There has to be a bigger push, a more rabid push, I guess, among whether that's fans or former Heisman winners or just former players. Someone like Vince Young that I mentioned earlier, he got second in that Reggie Bush race. So someone like him coming forward and saying he definitely deserves that trophy back would be a very interesting development, and I think would push people even further in that direction. So I hope he gets the trophy back. I hope that we can appreciate him for who he was and for the incredible, incredible player that he was every year, because without him, college football looks a little bit different. There's not that USC dynasty of sorts. There's not that these incredible plays that we all look back on with our mouths open. So the way I look at it is cutting one of the legends of the sport out of one of the most important nights in the sport feels a little goofy to me. So very excited that Johnny Manziel did this, hoping that others join suit because they're going to need it. But that is going to do it for this segment. We are going to take a small break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some games. We're going to talk about the best games in Week 3 and Week 4. We did Week 0 to Week 2 last week, so definitely check out that video. But Week 3 to Week 4 is very interesting, so we'll get into that right after this.